This is One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm your host, Dr. Wayne Pernell, the Outfluencer and your powerful presence mentor. I've got a special guest with me today. Most people might think that talking to a tax reform expert might not be their cup of tea, but guess what? This gentleman is brilliant, just brilliant. One of the sharpest minds I've met in a long time. And I mean, I meet a lot of amazing people. Julio Gonzalez is with me today. He is the founder and CEO of Engineered Tax Services. He has brought engineering tax studies to mainstream America. And basically, what he does is he finds ways to save companies money based on how I guess a few things. We'll ask deeper questions than this, but I'll get you to explain this, Julio, about how the business is structured and how they basically report. But also, I mean, there's some things in here in your history. You have, what is it, 30 family companies that you started, something like that. So we're going to talk all about Julio's history, what he's doing now that is, it's incredible. And I am not doing a very good job at articulating it. So Julio Gonzalez, welcome to One Sharp Sword.
Well, I appreciate that. Listen, we appreciate all you do out there as well. I'm an avid reader of your books and believe in all the things that you're preaching out there through social media. And, during these times, I think those messages are really helpful. And so we're really appreciative of all you're doing out there.
That's kind, Julio. Thank you. Talk a little bit. I pretty much made a mess of your bio. So could you talk a little bit about, first of all, what is engineered tax services, and what is the easy way to describe that?
Well, let's see, Doctor. Do you know how many pages there are in the IRS tax code?
Is this a quiz?
A little quiz. I thought we'd have a little fun.
I, I don't. I am afraid to even think about it.
Yeah. Well, there's close to 1 million pages in our tax code. And so you can imagine that the tax code, although you would think it'd be so simple, it's quite complex. And I think it was made that way because of the way, our government is. And so with 1 million pages of tax code, there's 1 million niches within the tax code and people that are experts in certain tax codes. There's only a few tax codes that require you to be a licensed engineer, to be a licensed scientist, to be, a medical doctor. And that's where our niche is. So these are tax credits and tax benefits that have been out there for, decades. But, when I started in the business in the 80s, we were only able to really do these tax credits for the Fortune 500 companies out of the big accounting firms. And then really my goal was to say, hey, let's bring these tax credits, tax benefits to all small businesses that are patriotic, that should be rewarded for doing the same things that the Fortune 500, the public companies are doing, but don't have access because the small to mid-sized CPA firms didn't have access to engineers, medical professionals, scientists to certify these tax credits for their clients. So that was really the goal in 2001, was to say, can we bring this to USA mainstream?
That's fantastic. We so need it, right? It's everybody deserves access to those 1 million pages, and you found a way. I mean, that's your specialty. So you not only found a way, but actually you founded the way to gain access to help small businesses as well as the large ones. I love that. I'm just so appreciative. That was well said. How'd you get there? How did all this start for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just started in the big firms doing this for the Fortune 500 companies, but I knew there was no ability for small businesses an entrepreneur is really at the smaller level to have access, because I knew the CPA firms were never going to have those type of resources. And so, my real thought was to be that resource to the CPA community, the mid to small, to the one man show, and make sure that they knew that if their clients were developing infrastructure in the United States, if they were using US citizens for employment, if they were creating employment and creating innovation, their clients, that those things are rewarded. In our tax code, they're complicated because it requires licensed engineers and scientists. And so let's bring that to mainstream USA. Let's make sure that every CPA has those resources for their clients.
That's fantastic. How did you get started? Like, let's go personal for a little bit. Nobody really, well, maybe not nobody. To my mind, I can't think of someone who would wake up and go, I'm going to be a CPA and I'm going to be an expert. I'm going beyond, I want to study taxes and accounting. Like, at what point in your studies did you, I imagine it started with economics and you went, this is not only interesting, it's essential. So at what point did you decide, wow, I'm going down this specialty path? This is so important.
I just, when I was in accounting, our clients were always looking for us to do better and to find more tax benefits for them to preserve their wealth. And I just kept reading those million pages and kept
Wow.
figuring out new ways, reading tax law, not only the tax code, but reading tax law and finding niches that could help our clients. And that's really what it was, that constant reading of the tax code, finding niches that would apply to my clients, and then perfecting those at the Fortune 500 level, but then knowing that ultimately, that everyone deserved that, and that so few people really had access to that.
That's so great. You said some key things, and I'm actually writing it down, because this is the key for everybody, no matter what niche you're in. And you were listening when it happened, and that is, our clients wanted us to do better, right? We knew we could do better for our clients. We stepped it up, and you took that charge. You were like, we could do better, and something in you is compelled to read through the million pages and integrate that for small business. I love that. I love the do better, and I love the idea that you recognize that pretty much everyone deserves the same opportunities. It shouldn't be reserved for the big fortune companies, right? So I love that. I think that's so amazing.
That's certainly been our mission, to bring that to mainstream USA. I think we've done a good job over the last 2 decades, but our job's not done, right? I think that, still there's so many small businesses and probably their accountants and CPAs that have no awareness of this. It's been a journey. It's been a great journey. I know that we've rewarded so many business owners for investing in the United States and investing in employment and innovation. And so fortunately, we have preserved jobs. We've helped companies with capital requirements. We've helped people, get through this virus with these type of tax incentives. But, there's probably many more that we haven't helped, because there's still a long way to go in terms of education and awareness. And that's kind of our journey, our mission, to make sure that everyone in this country is rewarded for those type of investments.
It's so great. You're obviously, I mean, you care very much about this country. You're wearing a pocket square that has the flag, the stars from the flag. I love that. I love that. I tend not to get too political on this show,
Mhm.
and at the same time, you've been doing this a long time, and I'm very curious about what you've seen in terms of not necessarily specific administrations, but when there's been an administrative change, how has that left you in terms of, we we have new tax codes to look up, we have new, like, do you find yourself scrambling when there's when there's a change of administration? Do you find yourself um, feeling better or more optimistic at certain periods? Like, how has that been for you?
Well, it's been quite the process and quite the education. See, the only one that decides what tax laws we have or any laws federally is the Congress, the House, and the Senate. And then ultimately the president has to agree with those both parties. So that's the only way tax laws can change, is when the House comes up with tax proposals that are changes or additions or subtractions, and then the Senate would have to confirm that. The ultimately that would go to the president for sign off. So, that's why we've only had tax reform twice in the last 5 decades, because it takes a lot of things to come together for three different parties, really, the Senate, the House, and the president, to agree on something. So the stars almost have to align, or there has to be urgency. So when President Trump came on board, the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and he was obviously in the Oval Office. So that likely meant we were going to have tax changes. Well, we had significant tax changes. We had over 4,000 pages of tax changes. So obviously that, and then we had urgency. We had the COVID situation, and that created urgency in terms of how can we change the economic policy, our tax policy, to help the country go through this system. And so those are the type of situations where you have tax law changes, and you just want to make sure that you have 400 plus people in Senate, 100 people in the House, or reverse that. And none of them really have owned small businesses or owned businesses, and none of them are CPAs, tax attorneys, but they write our tax laws. So, I'm up there routinely making sure that we help advise from a bipartisan standpoint what's good tax law, what could be the unintended consequences when you create bad tax law. We've seen it both ways, right? And unfortunately, it'd be great if, like the interest rates, we could just kind of change our tax, as we need to, so it wasn't so complicated. But that's not how it is today. And so tax is very complicated. But when people are up there, when bills are being created, right, like the HEROES Act, the CARES Act, so everyone's up there because they're doing this bill to change or help the economy. But then you have probably 1,000 lobbyists up there for their interest group saying, this is why our group, the airlines, has to be in this bill, and why we need these tax credits to survive. The same with the hotel industry. Well, every industry is pitching their case. And then the Senate, the congressmen, the senators are listening and putting that into the policy and running that through and trying to get consensus on both sides and ultimately sign off. So things can move quickly. And if your industry is not at the table, you could be eliminated quickly as well. So you'll see a lot of interest groups up there, right? Because when you change tax law, you're taking from one group and giving to another group. That's what you're doing, right? If you're taking away one tax benefit, that means you're doing it because you can't pay for it unless you have money that you take away from the system to pay for something that you are giving to the system. So a little complicated and probably not the sexiest topic. Like you said, tax isn't sexy, but really, what else impacts our economy, right? The government only gets money from taxpayers, right? Or they print it. And so, this is where we have to think about everything we do from a tax perspective. So
Well, I was just
maybe
going
I've
to.
overcomplicated it a little bit.
No, that's great. I was just going to ask a couple of things. I think one is how much advising you do and to whom. The other question I have is, are we assuming zero-based budgeting? Is there we only have this, so we'd have to pull it from that, assumes a kind of a zero budget base, right? And then you said, or we print it, which is it shifts everything when you do that. So I'm wondering if without doing a full-on econ lecture if there's an easy way to sort of understand that, you know, are we in a thought process of we are in a budget, so there is a pot and it must be divided, versus we're looking for revenue flow, or and I guess that's what taxation is we get more money from, the federal government gets more money from each individual citizen and or entity,
Mhm.
or gives back to. So I'm wondering if you can offer a kind of a global perspective in an easy to understand bite.
Sure. So let's just go over the CARES Act, right? We added 2 trillion in debt in the CARES Act, right? Because basically the things that we did in the CARES Act were putting out stimulus money and things of that nature we didn't have the money for at the government, right? They didn't have the budget to do that. So basically they had to print that money
Mm,
to send it out, right? And get it out into the economy. And I guess what you're saying there is, hey, we're adding $2 trillion of debt, which Congress and Senate have to agree to. But is that the best investment? If we don't do it, what then happens, right? So are we better off creating more debt, borrowing to invest in the ultimate, individuals and small businesses through the PPP program, the checks that went out in the stimulus program, or are we not better off? Are we just better off not putting that money into the system, creating no more debt, and hoping that the small businesses and the individuals get by, and just let the economy do what it does in these type of situations? So that's really kind of the bet, really, and that's what we're looking at the HEROES Act. The House would like to do 3 trillion in debt to bail out states to do more individual stimulus checks. The Senate would like to keep it more towards 1 trillion, right? And the biggest thing there is, as you continue to print debt that and print money, the uh, the money, the dollar loses its value, and so all of a sudden your dollar weakens, right? And so people from all over the world then start to pull their money out. And so that's really how it works from an economic standpoint as well.
that's huge. That's gigantic, right? At an individual level, we're waiting for the the quote stimulus check, which isn't going to go all that far, and yet it's meant to stimulate the economy. So the bet is, I love that you use the word, that's the bet. The bet
Yeah.
is that that by creating debt, we're going to keep the economy flowing, and uh, and that our dollar value won't slip that far. That is tricky. What's your Where are you when you advise? Who are you advising, and how do you have a crystal ball that maybe they don't have?
Well, I've talked to every congressman up there, every senator up there in DC. I have calls with them routinely. And, you know, I just have more experience than all of them. So, I've been doing this for a long time. And, I have, my thoughts on when they're creating tax laws, things that I don't think would be helpful at all. And at the end, they can take my opinion for what it's worth, and certainly think it through. I think I've been very effective in how our tax reform went in 2017. I think there were things that Ryan and Brady were fighting for that I got them to take out of the tax bill. And and here again with the HEROES Act, I don't agree with certain things from a tax perspective, but I go by history, and sometimes the people that are in Congress, they haven't been there a long time. They haven't seen things that we did back in the 70s and the 80s from a tax perspective that did or didn't work, right? And so we don't want to repeat bad policy from historic perspective, right? I mean, if it didn't work once, probably not going to work again. And so those are the things we kind of talk through. And, we just try to share from a historic standpoint with them why it didn't work and why certain things create tax loopholes that ultimately create the economy to fail. Like we had the S&L crisis in the 80s because some of the tax policy they put in place was good, but some of it was really poor. And we had some immediate expensing of buildings that ultimately people just went out and bought buildings, not for economic needs, but for tax loopholes. That failed. We had the S&L crisis that followed. It was a nightmare. And 15 years later, the S&Ls were gone, right? We don't have savings and loans anymore. They became more of the Polaroid, right, or the Kodak. And the real estate industry took 20 years to come back, all because we created a bad tax law. And so those are the things, that listen, it's from a bipartisan support and approach. We have to listen to both sides and just kind of give them the historic perspective because, again, we've just been here a lot longer.
I have a couple of thoughts that just wash over me a little bit. We've been here longer. We have history. That's so important. Um, is there a place where you said both sides? Is there a place where there's a meeting of the minds, or where it's not about one side or the other side? Is there a place where there's sort of an understanding of a greater purpose? We all have to get through this, and we agree that this is the way.
I think in previous decades there was a meeting of the minds. I think it was much easier to come to consensus. I think that meeting of the minds has really kind of drifted apart. I think that they're almost polar opposites in terms of the parties and what they want to see. And so they seem to be far apart. Now, they got the CARES Act done. So that was something where both sides had to come to an agreement, right? And that was more of a thing created by urgency. So I think they came to an agreement there. I think they'll come to an agreement this week on the HEROES Act, or what they're calling the HEALS Act now. So, I think in times of urgency, I think they can be far apart, but then start to work together on some type of compromise that ultimately they get done. But it's rare, right? We've only had tax reform, like we said, twice since the 70s. So, changing tax laws is pretty difficult. But where are they together on? Some of the energy policies they're together on. And so we see some unity there. We certainly see unity when it comes to, individuals and sending out stimulus checks and things of that nature. Where we're apart is on state bailouts. Where we're apart is on, business liabilities and things of that nature. So, yeah, they come from different sides, and it's an interesting perspective to see how both really work, and they're complete different mindsets.
It's interesting, and this actually relates back to our listening audience, and that is, it doesn't really matter that there's a side. There's truth or value in pretty much both sides. Each side has a right. Right? There's a truth, there's a value that each side represents, and that you can't, you can't necessarily step in and go, well, this is wrong or bad, or it's like, well, the intention of what they wrote does this. The way they wrote it may not fulfill the intention, right? So it's not like either side is stepping up to do damage. And that's, it's one of the things that I talk about in relationships. I
Hmm.
mean, right? Politics is very much, it parallels relationships. It goes badly when you begin to do right fighting. I'm more right than you. I did the scorekeeping. I did this. You did that. I did this. Or the other way, you did this, so we're going to do that. uh, it's really important to keep in mind that nobody necessarily, like, it's gameplay if they do show up to do damage to the other side, but mostly it's about putting forth an agenda that is supposed to be for the betterment of everybody. Are you seeing that, or is there real divisiveness?
Well, I've seen a little bit of both. A lot of divisiveness, but ultimately coming to agreement on certain core values, in terms of individual small businesses, And obviously, putting money out to fund the virus, putting out money and funding to open schools safely, those things, we're seeing consensus in, and we're seeing compromise in the other areas so that ultimately these bills can get passed. And that is a good thing, right? Ultimately, we want what's best for all of us here.
That's so good. That's great. It is true. Um, Talk a little bit about your journey. I mean, you started ETS, Engineered Tax Services. You were also involved in multiple other companies yourself. I mean, talk a little bit about you and your journey, if you don't mind. Love to, I'd love to get the Julio Gonzalez experience. Who is this brilliant man in front of me?
Well, I appreciate all those kind words. You know, Engineered tax services has been really my devotion, which is bringing good tax benefits to all small business and all CPAs nationwide, not just the fortunate, you know, Fortune 500 and the big CPA firms. So, that was really the devotion. And, that's what I've been doing the past 2 decades. That's allowed me to be, an investor in real estate. So I do quite a bit of that as well, and invest in other businesses and other technologies. So, yeah, it's been a great journey. And, my expertise outside of tax is really investment in real estate. And, that's a real passion. And again, it's ultra uh, important that tax laws are good for all real estate investors as well. So,
Sure.
we watch that at all times.
True. Very good. All right. What I have two questions. What do you do for fun is one question, and the other question I would be curious about is your own leadership experience. You have several hundred people that you are keeping track of now. And so talk about what's that like for you as a leader, and then tell us a little bit about what you do when you're not being serious with tax law.
Sure. Well, I came from the Fortune 500 world, so that was a very intense up or out, decade of culture that I felt was, negative. And, but it was what it was, right? You go into a big corporation, you're a number, and you ultimately survive based on performance. You're competing with a bunch of peers. Um, you never, feel that great about the situation. It's just always, fear of losing your job and fear of not doing enough and fear of ever missing work. So, a bunch of us kind of grew up that way in the 80s, coming out of school and getting recruited on campus by those big companies and, dealing with that world. And so, I guess not, you know, doing well in that environment, but not wanting to, be in that environment. When you start your own company, I just felt like the opposite was probably the better approach, which was, hire the great people and don't micromanage them and don't stress them out with, you know, weekly, you know, you know, I don't know, just those benchmarks that are, in the big corporations are put in your face every day.
Yes. Yeah. You have more of an emphasis on do your job well than you do on kind of the butts in seats mentality. It's like, I know you're working if you've clocked in at this time and you clock out at that time. And yours is more, you've really turned into a more relational company. Like you really do care about the clients you work with, the businesses that you work with, and the CPAs that you're supporting. That's an important piece for you. It's not about, punching a clock and, getting yourself there. And as you said, micromanaging.
I think so. We never want to get too corporate. I mean, we fight that as we get bigger, that, people want to have more policies, more procedures to be more effective. And, I continue to kind of fight it at the very top by saying, what got us here was that extra customer service, that extra attention, and, not so much the corporate feel. And so you kind of battle that as you get bigger. But it's certainly important to me that we never get too corporate.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what do you do for fun?
Well, we love to rehab, real estate. We love to be with our animals, and enjoy the outdoors here in Florida.
Nice.
Especially, well, not when hurricanes are around like this weekend, but usually it's pretty nice around here.
Nice. Good deal. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you were hoping I'd ask or that you do want to share?
Well, I think that I would say to your audience that I think that it's it's great to be an entrepreneur, and it's great to make your employees be entrepreneurs, right? And have that kind of environment where they can you know invest in themselves, and we invest with them as well. So I like it to have an entrepreneurial feel. It doesn't have to be the kind of work environment that we've come out of. And I think you see more of that nowadays. Although I still think, even with the new generations, it's still more work versus entrepreneurship. So I always, you know, tell my people, like, you get an idea and let me invest in it and you. So let's grow something together. Let's grow your dreams together. And I enjoy that. And so, it's kind of, we're in this together, right?
The, and Julio, this is one of the reasons I wanted you here is just that spirit, the really who you are is so, here's this guy that's all about tax and tax law and a million pages of tax law. And it's like, hey, as an employee, let me invest in you. Let me invest in your idea. Let me invest in you. I love that about you. I love that about the culture of engineered tax services. That it's so rare that, excuse me, that something like that. I always have to apologize these days for coughing. It's like, that's allergies. This is not,
Oh, I
it's
know how you feel. Listen, I'm always afraid when I cough or sneeze that, here it goes,
right. That's allergies. It's not the virus, right? So,
Right, right.
excuse me for that. But that's, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of you, and the way you run the business is incredible, especially as it's growing. I mean, your ETS has expanded so much recently, and you're keeping the culture intact. It's a big feat. So I
Well,
wanted to applaud you for that.
yeah, well, we appreciate that. Listen, we do go through those growth phases, and still trying to keep the culture good and the energy great. And it can take one bad apple to kind of bring that down quickly, so you're constantly monitoring against that. But ultimately, we're listening to people like yourself and finding ways to do better by educating ourselves on the kind of things that you share with us. And I think those are really helpful. I get into the office every morning and try to review the list of things that I've learned and have to focus on to make sure that that's serving an effective leader every day.
That's awesome. So good. So good. What if people wanted to find you? What?
Yeah, they could come to our website at www.engineeredtaxservices.com, and we have some tremendous tax benefit summaries there. We have great case studies. And really, we're here to be a resource to you and your CPA firm and your accountant. We come in and do those tax credits. We're paid for success. So ultimately, we come in, work with your CPA. We come in, we're do the study, we're out. And hopefully we do a good job for you, that we are allowed to come back every year and do those tax credits for you and your CPA firm. But really, it's a partnership between our clients, their CPA, to make sure that these tax credits, work well for them and reward them for all the great things they do.
Reward them is code for saving lots of money, which,
Yeah, it's true. Wealth preservation.
yes, love that. All right. Engineered with a D on the end, engineeredtaxservices.com. So good. Julio Gonzalez, anything else you want to share?
Well, listen, we'll keep those updates every day on the website and LinkedIn as well on what's going on with the Hills Act and the Heroes Act. Certainly, I think they want to get that done by the end of the week, and what that means for every individual and every small business owner, I think we'll know within the first week of August. The key thing is, as is with any change in tax code, is getting the information. Your accountants, your CPAs are already learning 10,000 new pages from 2017, another 1,000 pages from the CARES Act. And so if you need any tips on and summaries on what that HEROES Act is going to mean to you and your business, we'll keep you posted online. And hopefully that's good education so that you can share that with your CPA, because they're adjusting to all this new tax code, new tax forms. And, so they may take a year to catch up on all this stuff. And hopefully we can bring quick summaries that you can at least run by them and ask them if these are the things that might work on your benefit.
I've been to the website and I've been to your LinkedIn page. You've got some amazing graphics. That one of the graphics is identifying the difference between CARES, Hero, and a couple of others, and really so smart. It just breaks it down, so it makes it easy to understand. And the fact that you're doing this, you're doing updates on almost a daily basis as things shift, so helpful, so very helpful. Thank you.
Oh
Thank you.
yeah, my pleasure. We put the federal updates up there, but state laws, tax laws change all the time, right? California has a vote coming up that's going to vote on 16 new taxes for the state of California, the millionaire tax, the real estate property tax. Things could change overnight in November in California for all the taxpayers there. And so we're watching that, but we're watching it every state, right, doctor? Because you're there in California,
Uh,
and the deficits are getting larger because of this pandemic, and so they have to make it up. So where do they make it up? Where do they go for more taxes, and how does that impact the individuals and the businesses there? And we'll keep you posted on that. We'll keep you posted on every state in terms of what's changing, and those are important things that everyone needs to keep posted on, because there's one thing that's certain: if you are educated on tax code at the state and federal level, you're going to preserve wealth. If you think of an accountant as an expense, you probably have the wrong accountant. If you think of them as an investment, they're going to know these rules and preserve your wealth. And that would be my advice to all small business owners. Don't think of accounting as an expense. Think of it as an investment. If you have a good accounting team, a good outside accounting team, they'll actually find the credits. They'll actually make money on your investment. If you're just
that
finding, you know, subpar and just thinking of it as an expense, it will be an expense, but it'll be an expense not only that you're paying, but of all the missed things that you could have had.
perfect. I think that's perfect. That's an amazing way to tie up our interview together, right? That it's about wealth preservation. It's about investing in yourself and in your business, and to think of your accountant, if he or she is a great accountant, then it is an investment. That's awesome.
Yeah. Listen, if you weren't feeling healthy, you'd probably get a trainer to come to your house and train you on fitness tips or dietitian trips, things of that nature, right? But no one thinks of tax that way. But it's truly, one of those things you want to invest in to be best off.
So good. So very good. Julio Gonzalez, thank you for joining me on One Sharp Sword.
Thank you,
Really
doctor.
great to have you. This is One Sharp Sword. I'm Dr. Wayne Pernell, the Outfluencer, your guide on this journey, and your powerful presence mentor. Thanks for joining us.